talking about best practices. Howdy, hola, everybody. Back once again for the PuppetConf track. How are you? Don't answer that. My name is Gary Larizza. I am a professional services engineer with Puppet. If you're here and know me, you probably know me because I write some shit. Sometimes, occasionally, write some stuff. I also am known for gesticulating wildly just before people take pictures. Incidentally, that picture has made its rounds. It's in our training now. If you look on Facebook, there is an ad where like this is like PuppetConf 2016. This is like live stream right now. Like my mom has liked that picture 4 times, so now she hasn't liked it. She liked it so much. And I promised this year, if I pointed, I would do it with my middle finger. That way, nobody would ever use the pictures. I mean, I don't want to do it again. Too late, it's done. I remember last year, actually, when I was giving that talk, I heard the click, because there was silence, because everybody was bored, and looked down and went, what am I doing? And sure enough, you know, there it is. But I'm Gary Larizza. I am not that Gary. Nobody knows who that Gary is. That's a good thing. And in the past year, we went from having one Gary, the Gary, to there are 5 times 5 Garys at Puppet, which doesn't matter because I'm the only one you need. Seriously? It should just do that. Like Gary, 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 Gary. I took that from our internal like people app, because now that we're 450 people, like evidently Google Sites doesn't work. But that's the, in Puppet right now, like top 20 Hall of Fame, which, let's scratch that one off right there. Aw, too soon? Seriously? That was what you got you? You are in for a while. So if I can just bump off Steinke, I can get up in the top 15, and I think we get a watch or something. I don't know. But we're not here for that. We're here to talk about roles and profiles. Yay. Ideally, people have been using roles and profiles. Is there anybody in here, when I say the words roles and profiles, has no idea what I'm talking about? Shut the hell. I'm not going to mock you for it. I'm actually just asking. Cool. OK. So what we wanted to do with this talk this year was not only have something for people who had heard of this thing, somehow hadn't heard or read or done anything about it, to kind of give an intro, but also to kind of update things. Spoiler alert, not that much to update. But we will go through that. And we also kind of have standards and stuff now, which is interesting. If you're not familiar what roles and profiles is/are, what it is, it's a way to structure your Puppet code, OK? Because back in the day when we used to write the Puppet code, we would write these modules. And you'll have technology stacks that have dependencies. You know, Jenkins requires Jira. Tomcat requires Jira. You have these stacks. And so you'd build this cool, like, awesome Jira module. And then inside it, you would like require things from the Java module. And your Jira module would be awesome because you spent like tens of seconds on it. And then the Java one was like, right? Java, ensure present. And so somebody would be like, can I get your Tomcat module? And you'd be like, sure, but the Jira one, you know, the Java one kind of sucks. And that was because we were thinking at it at too low of a level, right? We wanted to get these dependencies, but we didn't know like how to express it. We needed to move it a little bit higher. And that's where roles and profiles came about. There is no magical reserve word in Puppet for roles and profiles. Truly, it was created by a dude who is here somewhere, Craig Dunn, when he worked for the BBC, and just called it roles and profiles, and arguably kind of named it backwards. But I mean, we're going to go with it. It's Puppet. We do that a lot. And so what the profile is a layer for the implementation of that stack, right? So in that profile, which is just a module, just a Puppet module with Puppet classes, we would declare the Jira class, or I keep saying Jira. I don't know. They paid me or something. Declare the Java class, declare the Tomcat class, set up the dependencies between the two, you know, anything else. And now you had one class, profile Tomcat, profile Jenkins, that you could declare, and you could get the whole stack. And that's really what we wanted. And it was just a simple little elegant solution. It's also where Hira data goes. And then roles are just your machine types. If we go and look, I have slides. I keep forgetting that. There's a profile for Jenkins. If you're looking at this and going, no, all that stuff's not right, like, shut up. But 2, yes, I know. That's the point. We're going to talk about how many times I did it wrong there. But that's what we're dealing with. Do some Hira lookups for data, declare some classes, have a good grand old time. And then role is just the type of machine you have that pulls in different profiles, okay? Now, the issue was when you talk about this, roles and profiles, there's such like a ramp to get up there. You have to understand how Puppet works, what Puppet modules are, dependencies, collecting between the two. So there's lots of tech, lots of terms, and lots of variations. And the lots of variation thing was key, you know? You'd send me out, and I'd set up and say, do roles and profiles like this. And then you send like Zach Smith out, and he'd tell you to do one way. And now we have kind of an expansive Puppet partner network. And so they would go out and set something up. And invariably, all y'all would be like, well, Gary said. And so we wanted to have, like, I hate the word best practices, because my best practice sure ain't your best practice, let me tell you. But we wanted something that we could say, here's like how we start. Here's how you should genuinely or generally do it. So we came up with the idea that internally in Puppet, we should document these things, because that's usually a good idea. And so we came up with this repo internally for CS standards. And the first two were the roles and profiles standard. And so I wrote these things up. I did it in like ISO 8000, whatever it is, the shall and the must and the mays and all that kind of stuff. And then we opened it for like comments and feedback internally. And we got it. We got a lot of it. I am strongly opposed to, shut up, Reed. So that's Reed, Nick Walker, Brett. I didn't actually read any of this. I hope it's not bad. But we went back and forth and sort of decided upon, after like flipping a coin and somebody running away, I don't know, on these standards. And that's what we're going to go about. It is currently a private module because there's a lot of other stuff in there, and we're looking for the best way to make it public, consumable in our docs format and that. So it's not out right now. I'm sure it will be very soon, and I'll give you my manager's email when I'm done, and you can just like send emails to him about it. But the bigger point about this is you should think about having standards for your internal organization. Because I'm going to be up here, and I'm going to like say a bunch of stuff, and it's going to be fun. But you're going to have to go back and write the code. And so inside your organization, what I've been telling people over and over is don't necessarily focus on the exact things that I say. Think about your escalation path for complexity. Because when you start with Puppet, I mean, all of the sysadmin mindset is like, let's build the fortress of I will never have to change this ever again. And you know how well that works, right? But for Puppet, don't repeat yourself isn't the point, right? We have these abstractions to get the complexity all away, but the point is legibility. You should be able to understand it. You know, Luke made up a word in 5 minutes out there of situational awareness, but it's exactly it. You should be able to understand what is going on. And you should be able to understand, I'm going to start here and then move up here and move up here. For example, you know, if you are familiar with R10K or Code Manager, we use a repository called the control repo that has a local little site dir that you can put modules in. People will be like, do I put a module there? Do I put it in the Puppet file and pin it? You know, what? And so this escalation path can be something like, hey, if you're building a module, it's got one class, like less than like 5 resources, you're the only person building it, maybe start in that site dir, just so you don't need to create a whole repo with all sorts of things on it. If you add complexity, break it out, put it in a repository, pin it to the Puppet file. You know, have these sort of logic gates that say, look, start here, when you hit here, go move to that sort of thing. Focus on that, not necessarily Gary said, because it changes, kind of, okay? Profile or profiles, don't worry, we'll get to that. And yes, where do we store the profile and the profiles? We recommend in the control repo, which is this over here. If you go to github.com/puppetlabs/control-repo, that is a good starter control repo if you don't have one. And inside the control repo, you'll see that we have a site directory that has a profile and role directory meant to start a module. Okay? We recommend that you start there. Why? Well, because usually you set up a webhook that anytime the control repo, which is the thing that kind of like controls all your servers, anytime it changes, we do a code deploy. And when you change a profile or a role, you're pretty much going to test that thing out like right now. If you commit to an Apache module, it might just be, let me commit this and check with it later. A role and profile is kind of a big deal, you know? We also have set up environment.conf to point to that site there, right there, so it's already ready for you, okay? The escalation path is, look, if you have different teams that want to share profiles or contribute or business units, or you need to like restrict permissions so that you don't give them permission to the entire control repo and control that separately, great. Break profile and roll the modules out into their own repo, manage it in the Puppet file. Robert is your father's brother, the whole deal, okay? What do we call it? I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. Name it profiles, name it profile, name it lamp, whatever. In the beginning, we named it profiles because it was a bunch of profiles. But when you write out the class, it says profiles, : Jenkins, right? And now we've got an S problem. If you use Puppet more than like 12 seconds, you'll realize we have a lot of S problems. There was an S shortage in like 2009. So some things are plural, some things are not. We've standardized ish on naming it, calling it profile, so that when you write profile : Jenkins, it sounds right to your ear, whatever. When you decide that you have that complexity in a lot of teams and you need to break it out so that maybe you can share an individual profile, you can make those their own module. But because of namespacing and stuff, you can only ever have one module in your module path called profile or profiles. So you got to kind of like do this like hacky prepending type stuff. Again, it sucks, but if you don't need to do it, don't do it. Right? That type of thing. Next, naming. Name your profile according to the technology you're using it, or you're using. Because your profiles are kind of like your armory. You know, you have this whole selections of things you could possibly use. In your organization, you might be managing Apache web servers, and also IAS, and also whatever runs on Solaris, which is nothing. And so, no offense if anyone here is Solaris, but the thing about it is you need to model those individual things. You need a profile for them, okay? The escalation path is you can extend and sub namespace if it makes sense. If you manage SSH server separate from the client and you need to turn one on or off, you can do that. You can also do that in the main profile with some conditional logic and stuff like that. Remember, there's many ways to do things. In the end, you are generating a JSON blob called the catalog. All this hackiness in the DSL gets you a big JSON object. That's it. You could write it by hand with cute artisanal tools, give it to Puppet, and it would work. And if I name stuff this way, and you name stuff that way, and we get the same catalog, like, who wins? Puppet, because we sell you more stuff. But that's the thing. This one was one that was a little contentious back and forth. Profiles may be parameterized to provide an API to the implementation. It makes sense, but it's kind of different from how we did it before. Parameters in a class in Puppet, those are your like Phillip head screws. You know, ooh, I can take those open. Like I'm not going to void the warranty here. So when you break out a parameter, it's like, oh, you can add or change this bit to it, okay? But why would you parameterize it? Well, because most of the time in your profiles, you're doing some HIRA calls or getting some HIRA data. And if you've got them in the body, it's sort of kind of hidden. But if you expand out parameters, that's something Puppet can now discover and collect and tell you what's out there. So when you eventually need to see where all the higher lookups are, if you have parameters, it's a little bit easier. This is something that I hadn't been doing for the longest time and really didn't put a lot of thought into it until Reed kind of was like, hey, doesn't that make sense? Yeah. If you haven't been doing it, don't go home and change everything. But if you're getting started or thinking about things, or you have a problem with doing that, that's an idea. That's a standard, I guess. That's our best practice-ish. You want to limit resource style declaration of a profile. Resource style is like this, because it looks like a resource. But these two things are not exactly the same deal. I mean, yeah, they both declare the class, but in a compiled catalog, if you use the resource style declaration more than once, Puppet will blow up because it's a duplicate resource error, type and title, okay? The include function doesn't do that because it's a function and it's idempotent. It can only declare the class in one way because it doesn't accept parameters. So the include function says, is this thing in the catalog? Nope, okay. And then the next time it hits it, is this thing in the catalog? Yeah. Okay, cool, safe. But these two things are trade-offs. Parameters to your profile give you the ability to do things like going into the console and explicitly setting that. But right now, with the console in the current state it is for Puppet Enterprise, doing that is a resource-style declaration under the hood. So if you do that, and then another class does this, you may run into Puppet errors of things duplicate resource error, okay? So it's like, okay, I need to limit this, but I need to express this parameter. How do I do it? Hira automatic parameter lookup. And now we're into like that ball of wax. It's an awesome thing, but I'm always cautious of it because it's magic. In this case, it's magic that solves a problem. Use it, all right? These are those escalation paths. Start here, then here, then here, until you have the problem, okay? Profiles, it's Italian, may declare other profiles. And this makes sense. Because if we go back to my Jenkins example, you saw I like full-on declare Java right in there. Because no one else needs Java. You know, Jira needs Java, Tomcat needs Java, like your buddy down the street needs some Java. There's many different things out there, so what do you do when one profile declares Java? Escalation path, you break it into its own profile. You parameterize it, you've got the higher lookups. Now you use the include function, and you know it's there. You can still set dependencies in the profile to the profile for Java with the include function. Now you're solving problems. Yay, high five. Profiles usage. Only site-specific resources should be declared in profiles. So generally in profiles, you're just going to be declaring classes, okay, things. But sometimes there's cases where you have a customization, certificates, credentials, those type of things. You're probably not going to send a pull request to the Puppet Labs Apache module to accept your site cert. Or do, and then like see how far that goes. But it might have been done. But go ahead and put those in your profile. That is yours. It's your site-specific implementation, all right? And you can add those. When you start getting a lot of resources in that profile, you can collect those and put those in another class, all right? Where does it go? I don't know. You can subclass the profile, profile Apache, : you know, mycorp, whatever. Some people, most people have not me, but some people, most people will have a module for their organization. You know, the Nike module or the Puppet module. No, that doesn't make sense. But they will have a module for their organization, and you can subclass that and be like, you know, Apache customizations. Put it somewhere, but the bigger point is, whatever you decide, be consistent. I know it's a hard thing. We have problems too. The point is, you want to give people an immediate knee-jerk reaction for where to look. Oh, it's a customization. I know we put those in X, right? So I am not concerned where you put it. I am concerned that you continually do that over and over again. It is like training monkeys here, right? I know that this goes there. I know that that goes there. That's what you want, because when things blow up, you're looking at things from a different way. When you're writing Puppet code, it is from top to bottom. Like, you have all the view of how everything's going to be in your writing code, and it's wonderful. But when you have a problem, something blows up in production, you start from the file. And you go, that file has a different value. What touched that file? I don't know. And so you grep through your Puppet code, hopefully, or or you start from the top. Well, it's the role, and then get into the profile, thus this, here it is. Or you've used Hira and create resources, and then, like, roll the dice, okay? I don't like create resources. Warning, caution, warning. These next ones were ones that kind of caused disagreement. And so I put this up here so when you come up to me afterwards and disagree with me, I can just go, okay. But profiles can or may be platform-based. If you manage operating systems that are disparate from one another, very disparate, right? Like Solaris and everything else. I wanted to say Windows, but Windows is kind of cool now. Like, what the heck's going on? But when you manage all of these different operating systems and their implementations are very vastly different, you will probably find every time you implement a profile, you're like, well, I got to do it different for here. If you break out and you put Windows, Linux, OS X, now you've given people a place to look immediately. It broke on a Windows machine. I know it's profile Windows. And then good luck, right? But if you only manage Linux, you probably don't want to do this. One of the biggest pet peeves, which I guess we're calling them triggers now, is what if I've stopped listening. What if in the future we want to manage SUSE? Like, go back in your time machine to 95. But if that what if is our Q4 goal is to manage, then you might need to do that, okay? And again, it's making it easier for you to find. Profiles may also be single point of entry. So what you can do is have a profile for DNS name servers and then a conditional switch that says, if you're on Linux, do this declaration. If you're on Windows, do this declaration. That can expand, but it's there. That's good if you only manage Linux and then occasionally you might manage a Windows machine or you're upping the implementation. If you start out this way and suddenly Windows uptick takes, you can eventually refactor to this and this will work just fine for now, okay? Yes, I understand we want to limit our refactoring, but you're going to do it. It's going to happen. These are the options that we get, okay? And that was really contentious. People was like, we should do this. Well, what if we do that? Okay, just give them options. Roles. You will notice that we have a lot of standards for profiles because those are kind of common. Like, we have those tech stacks too. Turns out we can set them up as well. But roles are your implementation, okay? They are named how you do things. They are for you, very decidedly. So we have some guidelines, but we don't know how you do business. That's up to you. One of the shorthand things that I do when I get started with people and they say, well, what should I call this role? Is I tell them, just write out what one of your machine host names up there. Because everybody tells you, don't impart metadata into your host name. And then everybody does it, right? And it's like every one of these things has some little symbol meaning inside there. And I say, OK, write it out. And then tell me what every bit means. And for every bit, if that is a layer in your Hira hierarchy, i.e. you can do some data switching in Hira for it, we're going to pull it out and see what's left. And so like SFnet is, yes, these are San Francisco nodes. That's a location. Generally, your location's in the Hira hierarchy, so it's out. Dev is like dev test prod. That's definitely in your hierarchy, whatever you call it. So that's out. AP stands for application server. That's a machine's role. It may or may not be in your hierarchy. But since we're managing a role, it might go to the role, maybe. And then 12 is like your cluster number. 01 is like the individual number and something like that. That means you're left with role app server or not, right? And so that's a good starting point for where you want to go. And generally, it is something simple like this. Because when you think of the types of machines that you have, you're going to be like, well, they vary wildly. Well, you have database machines. You have application servers. The differences are largely codified in data. Yes, the SQL connectors are over here. Yes, we add more of this in dev. We do this in prod. Those are things you can really put into Hyra. The same Puppet code's probably going to apply to dev test prod. And that's what we're dealing with here, is differences in Puppet code for different classes of machines. All right? So you start here. Again, that's like back of the napkin. Roles are named according to type. They're named to what you call your stuff internally. All right? Application server, CI server. And it's general. You don't say role Apache. Because now you're conflating the point of the profile and the role. And again, you might have web servers that are Apache and Nginx and IIS, and you'll need to handle them all in the role some way. And that comes next-ish. Roles may be namespaced for clarity. Because we have and have had inheritance in Puppet for the longest time, but we like bury it in sand and tell you not to look because the implementation wasn't exactly the same as the classic programming language OOP implementation of inheritance. Because Puppet itself is not like your classical OOP programming language. But for roles, it makes sense. The core role class is where you put all your stuff that applies to all of your machines. That's your security base, your site base, everything that's done. And then role : app server is a role, and then also some customizations. Things like, Tomcat, expensive Oracle app, whatever. And then if you have something that touches credit card data, you're probably subject to PCI. So you have an app server that's just a little bit different. But if that PCI stuff can be codified in Hyra, i.e. the only difference about PCI machines is maybe a couple of configurations, you don't really need to extend it. This is generally if you need to add or apply more Puppet code. Keep those in mind. Puppet code, the model, Hyra, and the data. So you can namespace them for clarity. It's totally fine. The names are there to assist you. All right? Again, you're just creating a JSON blob called the catalog. That is it. Roles get put in the control repo just like profiles, right? And you can escalate those out, but generally won't have the need to. And then we get the warning signs, because this actually caused some of the most back and forth, surprisingly. Can roles contain conditional logic? Upward inflection? I mean, can they? Yes, they can. We tell you not to. So here's the big deal about conditional logic. For me, I would enjoy that if I have a bunch of app servers, Windows, Linux, using like JBoss, Linux using expensive Oracle software type thing, right? I want to classify them all with the same role and then just let it figure out and go down the line. Well, that's great, but that imparts some magic. And people would be like, how do you know that you ever got the expensive Oracle setup on there? Well, we have PuppetDB. You can ask PuppetDB, show me all nodes who have the class applied to them of this. You can go into classes.txt in your state dir and look at that. But the bigger deal is this. How do you know whether to apply Tomcat or maybe something else higher? And you'll give me an answer, and I'll be like, no. Do you have a fact? Do you have a fact to determine one or the other? Do you look at the host name? Do you have something like a spreadsheet? Do you have a central source of truth? Because if you have a fact, that's stuff that you can do in conditional logic. But sometimes it's just like, I don't know, we have a bunch. Honestly, in a lot of places, that's the standard, not the exception. And so the cool thing is our Puppet Enterprise console has that rule-based engine. So you can go in there and say, rule, regex, the fourth character in the host name is a D, and also check this fact, and also look at this, and if so, then yes. And so our console gives you that awesome flexibility. So you can create a role just for, expensive business unit that does this thing, and then classify it in the console, if that's what you need, OK? But a lot of people were getting stuck on the fact they're like, you said no conditional logic in the, did I? I've said a lot of things. Today, think about those, OK? They're both acceptable. We want to reduce magic. We want to keep it clear. We want to give people a path to follow to trace the code. Follow that. Don't follow stuff that I might have said, maybe. I swear it wasn't me, OK? Can roles be inherited is another issue. This was something early on, and I think it's in my blog post from like 2000 and late, is that in the roles module, you can say role : application inherits role. Well, the issue with that is we don't use inherits, the keyword, a whole lot, but in the params.pp pattern. So if the worry is somebody's not going to know what that is and then think they can use it elsewhere, by all means, don't do that. What's your other option? Role : app server. What's the first line say? You knew it. You've been here too. Include role, right? Done. There's your argument. OK, don't use inheritance, or do. That's the thing, OK? I cannot stress enough, I've said it like 12 different times, do what causes less friction between your teams, and it's easy to follow. When I get together, there are about 20-something PSEs on the team now, all around the world. And when we get together, it's a rare opportunity, like once, maybe twice a year. And invariably, I get people going, I had somebody that said, you told them to do this, and like, I've never met this person. Well, they read something that you, yeah, OK. Make sure the point, don't get lost on the specifics of me being very whatever. It's make it work for you, OK? And that's the big deal. I have some time left at the end. Are there questions? We have Jesse, who I will gladly run around to ask questions. Is somebody in the back corner with a question? Can we put him back there?
Hey, Gary, regarding the parameters on the profile, I see both folks that'll pass in from a higher or write down into the modules, or, I mean, for me, it seems to make sense to use the profile as, like you said, the API.
Sure. Yeah, let me tell you a good story. We have a Puppet Enterprise module. And inside the Puppet Enterprise module, we have Puppet Enterprise : profiles. We, as Puppet, have made the distinction and actually set a standard that parameters in the Puppet Enterprise : profile class are there for your consumption. They are, again, the Phillips head screws so that you know they are user-faceable. Anything down there, again, caution. And that's not a fair metaphor because our docs will even tell you to do certain things. But we consciously make the decision of whether or not to expose parameters up to the profile based on, is it like a user-facing change, or is it like higher data caution? You are probably in the top something %. This is something you need to do. Eric can tell you a lot of those conversations happen. So yeah, but the thing is, if you've already, what? Sorry? I was talking to the guy behind you. If you've already started to do it one way, right, again, that's something for a refactor. But that's the principle. And my father always told me it was about principle. Somebody else. Yo. Oh, Alessandro, this is going to suck.
Yes. In fact, I have two things to say about the slides that you've shown, and I don't know if there were mistakes or you were just wrong. One is the environment.conf example. You have a module, site, and module path in the example. Mm-hmm. And when I saw that, I would say, I would do site, module path. I don't know if it's just mine. Is that?
What you're talking about is this one right
when
here?
When you show the environment.conf file, here.
It should most likely be site, : modules. Nobody has just corrected it. You're right. Okay. It should be user-facing first.
other corrections, just to piss you off. In the profile, in the profile where you include the Java, you declare the Java class.
Yeah, this is actually bad.
Yeah,
But OK.
exactly. I will never use a declaration like this in a profile for Java.
This is not example 42 good. Trust me. Scary, hacky bad.
OK, so do we agree also here? We should include at least a class like Java, which is supposed to be used in many profiles, should
Yeah,
include.
we should include the profile. But I introduced it here as kind of like, these are the bad things. Let me tell you now where to go. So, yep,
OK,
that's
so
it.
you can go on. Thanks.
That was, I got away easy with Alessandro. Incidentally, if I go back, I didn't call out any of these pictures, which is kind of intentional, just to make you wonder. This is from the first PuppetConf camp ever in 2009. That's Luke wearing a BOS shirt saying the state of Puppet is good. And back then it kind of was, except for the fact that you remember that that was just like at 0.28 days, or 0.29. It was good for like a hot second, but yeah. Questions?
If we built a module that we decided not to profile and gets plugged into our Puppet file, okay, and we declare a role class, should we wrap that declaration inside of another profile, or should we just go ahead and say include module name?
That's a really good question. Yeah, what if you've got a module that you just include? You don't need any customizations, it just works. I say, so this is one of those cases where you're like, hey, escalation path, you should just include the darn thing, and then if you have problems, do what I mean, not what I say. In this case, I would put it in a profile because you're training people that profiles go there, and the profile is the first place of the implementation. You don't want to be, profile's the first place, except for these ones that are so simplistic. It introduces some confusion, OK? And that's the big thing to avoid.
That gives you the traceability then.
It gives you the traceability, absolutely.
So what is your opinion or perspective on putting tests within your profile?
The folder tests or actual spec tests?
Actual spec tests, either spec tests for unit testing or for integration testing.
Turns out unit and integration testing is widely considered a good idea, and yet hard to do. No, the profile layer is a great place to start with those acceptance layer testing for integration, because that is the full-on implementation and will tell you if things break. Now, throughout the line, that module should have its own testing for its own internal abilities. These are now your yes. I did a talk last year on that, on the beaker type stuff. Doesn't matter what you use, but yes, testing at the profile layer. I am a big thumbs up for that. Do I do it?
Just to build on that a little bit, if you have a file resource declaration within a profile, should you then subsequently have the files and templates directory within your same directory as your
Yeah,
profile?
that's the thing that causes people worry, is like, whoa, now you're turning it into a full module. Guess what, it already was. If you're going to do that, I would namespace it so that in templates it would be according to the profile name so that you know where to track it. That's another reason to actually do it in your own module so you don't quote unquote litter the profile, but your profile is yours. You're not generally going to share it outside your organization anyway, so free reign, right? Again, in the end, Puppet don't care. It's the nicest way I could say that, to not violate the code of conduct. My heart was in the right place. Anybody else? Really? OK, cool. So in summary, everything is terrible. No one is happy, right? Now, the bigger deal here is that the pattern stays. It's been in use for a long time. We're starting to see from like this come back down to there, which is really, really awesome. The next level of things should be your tests, OK? Integration testing. That is where you will need to focus, because when we do these upgrades, I'm doing a lot of upgrades now, because it turned out the upgrade to 3 to 4 sometimes threw people through a loop. And so you can do the catalog diff, but if you have integration tests for your stuff, you can spin up a new master and run those tests. and see if you get the same result in the end, right? It is a good way to tell whether your refactor worked. If you need to spend time, write the test for the thing first, and then refactor internally, and then go. If you don't have tests and don't have time, every time you need to fix Puppet code, write a test for it. That'll get you some code quick, right? Build those up, because you're just going to be upgrading, and you want to improve your reliability. Our tooling will definitely improve too, but testing is the new, not the new, it's the next wave for you. And a lot of sysadmins haven't been exposed to that developer test idea. This is like literally what the DevOps was meant to do. Hey, developers do this, you should do it too, it'll help you out. You know, high five, okay? Other than that, I have 4 minutes left. If there aren't any questions, thank y'all for coming, and I'll see you later.